and both the judges stopped all questions. Mr. Shanti Bhushan was heard patiently, and of course, merit was there, the petition was allowed. This is one of the ways, since we are on the rule of law, to make an attempt individually, by every individual, to establish, in a way, the rule of law. I must tell you another incident. When I was requested whether I would be one of the speakers, I said, okay, I'm going to be a speaker in this session. I would prefer, I opted. When I came this morning, I was told that no, I'm supposed to be a speaker in some different session tomorrow. I did not agitate. I just said I was supposed to be a speaker in the afternoon. I will have to check out what should happen tomorrow. I will have to find out something. I mildly, friendly way asserted, and I'm before you this afternoon. That is the way one must find out ways. Now we are on a topic which is very important, and according to me, if law and order is maintained, is established and continues, major part of the good governance is achieved. Whoever may be the government, whoever may be the minister, because the law takes its own normal course to establish law and order. Somebody said, some famous man centuries ago, that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'm from Goa. I would like to give you some instances of how power corrupts absolutely. Years ago, he did. After he was elected, he became a minister. The first thing he did is he told one of his workers, why don't you go and file a complaint at the local police station against these two persons? They feel they're too smart. Lawyer complained that they attempted to kill you. The gentleman obediently goes and lodges a complaint. The two persons were immediately arrested. They were brought to the police station. They were undressed, accepting their underwears. They were taken out publicly in an open jeep in procession in the very same locality. Crowd gathered, and the minister was in the last car watching the fun. This is how the police works, because under the Constitution, law and order is a state subject. The police investigation agency works under the local ministers or the local government. I must cite another example how power corrupts. There was a minister elected, and the chief minister, for a certain reason, didn't want him. So this minister was involved in an incident. A police complaint was lodged against him. The chief minister tells him, you must resign, there's a police complaint, this offense is very serious. You get bail. The moment you get bail, you will be restored, your ministership will be restored. He resigned after the complaint was filed. He applied for anticipatory bail, which was not granted. And then it went on for quite some time. But the minister resigned, was taken out from the ministry. And that's how the power works. I will give you a third example. A small man bought a property, a small house plot, and built his house. The man behind him had already built his house illegally. He wanted a way through this property, which was earlier sort of open. So he started clamoring for the way. The matter went to the court. The court said status quo, because this man said there is no right of way. Now the man who was fighting for his claim, illegally, wrongly, happened to be a person having political influence. So despite the court order, the local politician who was a minister said that let us have some scheme, under this scheme let us have a way through this property. So some scheme was devised, and on a holiday, 20 policemen go to this place and start road. When the members of the house object, they are arrested, and while they were in jail or under arrest, the road was made. Till about midnight, the work was going on. This is how the corruption works. The last incident, the police do not take any responsibility. They do not want to work independently, efficiently, honestly, sincerely, or apply their mind, maybe because of incompetence. Recently, a man was just driving home with his parents, and he just stops on a way to buy vegetables, and a man comes drunk and starts asking him some question. He just wanted to come out because he was driving his vehicle. So he pushes the man to come out from the vehicle. The man unfortunately falls, and he was taken to the hospital, and after some days he dies. The offense of murder was registered, and this gentleman, accidentally who mixed this man, not knowing him any time earlier, was languishing in jail for 6 months. Therefore, there is no doubt that police or investigation agency in India has not been working well. Of course, CBI is the expert investigation agency, but some of the instances will show that the CBI also has failed to make mark. This all happens because the agency works under some government or the other and is under the influence of the government. Therefore, it is necessary, if we want good governance, that we must have an independent investigation agency. I am of the firm belief that we must have Indian Police Commission, not on the lines of Dharmavira Police Commission or the recommendations made thereafter, but slightly on the line of National Judicial Commission thought of, with some more facets considering the investigation, type of investigation, nature of investigation, modifying, as Mr. Acharya rightly put it, the recruitment of police is not done properly. Policemen are recruited only after they are able to pay lakhs of rupees to the persons who are going to recruit them. So policeman borrows money, he gets himself recruited. Then he starts recovering the amount he had paid to get employment. And by the time he recovers it, he becomes himself a corrupt person. Therefore, we must have an independent, impartial recruiting agency. We must also have training agency. Policemen, they do not know to properly detect a crime. Even after detecting, to investigate properly the detected crime. After finding out what is actually the crime. As I was just mentioning, somebody just accidentally falls. Offense under 302 is registered against him because of the incompetence, inefficiency of the investigation agency, and the man was languishing in jail for 6 months. Therefore, police personnel, after they are recruited, are required to be trained for the exigencies they are going to face during the investigation or in performance of their duty. Thirdly, they must be working under independent supervisory agency so that they are not influenced by anyone. And fourthly, there must be an independent prosecutors to prosecute the investigations or give directions in criminal matters when they are not only being investigated, but when they are actually being prosecuted in courts. I think this sort of an independent agency, like a police commission, will work well in the interest of securing law and order in the country. I would suggest, if it is not possible to have a police commission, a commission on the line of Canada, which is created by an act where the investigation is regulated by an independent body, the prosecution is regulated by the same body, the recruitment also is regulated by the same body. Therefore, there could be a law enacted which will control the whole sphere of investigation, prosecution of cases, as we have separation of powers in the Constitution. We must have something, either by law or by any other means, to have an independent police force to work so that the corruption, which is the main thing everybody talks about, is reduced to a large extent. And if the corruption is reduced, many of us are going to be benefited. I'm told I must stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Surendra G. Before I go on to the next part of today's discussions, I would like to make some very brief comments. First, so far as the overseeing of the investigation is concerned, which is a part of today's topic, let me tell you, even in the 2G case, even after the CAG had said that on account of the lapses on the part of the government, the nation had been put to a loss which was estimated to be about 1,76,000 crores. For several years, the CBI, having been in the know of these facts, did not make any investigation. It was only after the matter came before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, it was on the prodding of the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court was overseeing the investigation, that the CBI came out with all kinds of reports which were responsible for finding such important politicians to be spending time in jail, which the whole country knows. So that was the consequence of the investigation constantly being supervised by the Supreme Court bench in the 2G case. When this other matter, namely the money laundering case, in which Hassan Ali was there, about which Mr. Jethamalani so eloquently spoke, in which the counsel of Mr. Jethamalani was Mr. Divan, when that matter was also being heard, there was a companion petition in which I was also appearing for the petitioner. I had a very small vote, but on the last day of the hearing, when the bench was going to consider whether they were going to appoint somebody to supervise the government agencies to carry on the investigation under the money laundering, etc. So I stood up and addressed the court for 5 minutes. And I told them that the whole nation's gaze was focused on two entities today, on your lordship sitting in the Supreme Court and on that frail Gandhi looking man, another. And unless your lordships appoint somebody to oversee the investigation, you can take it from me that nothing will come up. After that, the judgment was reserved, and when after the vacation the judgment came, we were all very glad and happy to find that judges had appointed two former judges to the Supreme Court to oversee the investigation. Today, perhaps that direction is under some kind of a state review petition. But whenever it is activated, it has the potential to go a long way of not only sending those people who have been guilty of stashing their funds in foreign havens, but also in money laundering, bringing that money back and making it white, etc., being in jail. But perhaps a huge amount of India's money will come back to the coffers of the Indian government. Therefore, the importance of investigation being supervised by some independent, knowledgeable agency, and that must somehow become the norm. Secondly, so far as the independent investigation is concerned, as you have been told, that of course in every case, independent and honest investigation is required, but more particularly so in cases of corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act, because corruption is only against people in the government. It is only an offense committed by public servants. Therefore, in that case, it is of the utmost importance that only an agency which is independent of the government, ministers, politicians, bureaucrats, etc., is able to carry on an independent investigation. What would be an independent agency? We are not concerned with the details of the Lokpal bill or the Jan Lokpal bill. But what is most important and totally lacking in the bill which is pending in the Raj Sabha now is the requirement of independence is that the authority which has been given the power of investigation, its constitution must not be in the hands of the government. At least predominantly it should not be in the hands of the government or even the politician. Even if the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition are there, the majority of the members of the appointing authority must come out of the senior judges of the Supreme Court. If it is a 7-member committee which is going to select the Lokpal, members of the Lokpal authority, then in that case, even if we have 2 politicians, namely the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha, let there be 5 senior post judges, including the Chief Justice of India, to be the other 5 members of that committee. Then at least the selection of the members of the Lokpal authority, people could have confidence in. Secondly, the agency which investigated, supposing it is the CBI, the investigative agency, the government must not have any control over the postings, transfers, promotions of any member of that investigative agency. It is not enough that somebody, namely the director of CBI, is appointed by an independent authority. Not enough. Because the investigation will not be done by the director of CBI. The investigation will be done by individual officers working under him, unless they are free from any control of the government or government agency in respect of their postings, transfers, punishment, promotion, etc. They will look to those officers. Today, all officers of CBI, their promotion is handled by the Home Ministry. How can you expect them to investigate any seriously any allegations against any of the ministers of the government or against senior bureaucrats of the government unless the Supreme Court itself is supervising the investigation, which can't happen in many cases, which can only happen in a few cases. Therefore, what is important is the investigative agency must be free from political control in the sense that its officers must not be subject to disciplinary jurisdiction of the government, must not be subject to transfers by the government and their annual reports being written by people in the government. That must be done by a wholly independent agency. That's the most important requirement of independent investigative agency. As has been said, even the prosecuting agency also has to be independent to the government in those cases. Why? Because we know that in some states what was done was that even if the Supreme Court SIT appointed by the Supreme Court conducted an honest investigation and collected the evidence, what the government, if it was interested in spoiling that prosecution, would be to appoint its own convenient public prosecutors who would, instead of advancing the prosecution case, would take steps in destroying the prosecution case. So while an independent investigative agency is important, equally important is an independent and honest prosecuting agency. With these remarks, I would now call upon people who want to put certain questions to the people who have spoken. They are free to ask their questions. Limited to the points which have been covered in this session's debate.
I could understand about the law. Law is not merely a charter of does and don'ts. Law is all about making one human being beneficial to another by providing ceaseless facilities for their continuous existence and inclusive growth. I do believe to chase injustice, the sky is the limit. But I completely fail to understand why judiciary, being such a larger independent body, is failing to do justice with its objective and is failing to achieve the very purpose of law. If it is failing, then how far you expect another agency to be successful in this hijacked democracy? Thank you. My question is that how far do you expect another investigating agency to be successful in this environment?
We explain the difficulty because the